everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kayla and it's time to crack into a good book. So today's video is going to be the Leap Year book tag, which I was tagged a while back by Lana, and her channel is Lana She. This year is a leap year, and I certainly missed the filming this in a timely manner where it was closer to leap day, but it's still a leap year, so I think it counts. So the first question is an extra day. What is one book that brought a little something extra? So the book I chose for this is one I actually recently read and will obviously be reviewing for you soon, but that's The Gutter Prayer by Gareth Hanrahan. So this is kind of, it's kind of like grimdark, but it's more of like an epic fantasy with horror. It was really good, but basically we follow like a set of three thieves, and they're kind of trying to stop like an older malevolent evil from kind of like ruining everything, basically. So what I think brought a little extra for me was just like the crazy creatures in this book. Like there's these tallow men, which are basically like wax creepy people, and they're like, I don't know, just some of the descriptions. I guess I was kind of thinking of like evil Lumiere, but like entirely wax. I don't know, but it like was super creepy. And then there's the crawling ones, which are basically like sentient worms that can form like humanoid, I don't know, shapes and then like communicate with people. And then there's like the Raveler, which has like razor sharp tentacles and just like all sorts of crazy stuff. So I just thought that this was like really imaginative and kind of like a really fresh fantasy. So yeah, I feel like this definitely brings something a little extra. The second question is, taking a big leap, what is one book that you are or were afraid to read? I'm choosing a book off of my TBR pile, and that's Cold Iron by Stina, Leicht. So I don't know, I like had remembered being really interested in this book, and then I found it on Book Outlet and had like, I guess, kind of forgotten what it was about. But I think it's kind of more of these like flintlock fantasy type books. But I think what's intimidating for me is like, it's kind of chunky, and I've read the synopsis and I'm like, am I gonna like this? I'm not sure. I think I will, but I'm a little worried, I guess. So basically we have a race that has some sort of natural magical talents, and this kingdom has been using them to retain its elevated and seemingly impervious status in the world. We've got some like plots and assassination attempts against the heirs of this kingdom. I guess one of the heirs, I think there's twins, joins the army, and then the other is maybe joining the navy. Yeah, it's like slow to change. This particular kingdom will face the others, like the invading kingdoms, vast military armed with muskets and cannon. It's like, but a revolution is coming and possibly the end of the kingdom. Actually, that does sound really awesome. So yeah, this I think is going to be a flintlock fantasy, and I've never read anything by this author before, but this sounds really cool. It tells me in the back of the book that this is in fact a flintlock fantasy series. So what an example of that would be like the Powder Mage series by Brian McClellan, which I really enjoyed. So hopefully I'll like this too. The third question is, every 4 years, what is the fourth book you read this year? The fourth book I read this year was Not Even Bones by Schaeffer. This was actually a gift from Kasha in Bookland, which was awesome. Very nice of her. And I rated this 4 out of 5 stars. It's kind of like a YA, really dark urban fantasy where her main character and her mother are basically like dissecting supernatural creatures and selling them on this black market until her mom like one day brings home a live specimen and is telling our main character to cut off pieces to sell, and she's like not super into that, so she tries to save this boy but ends up being sold on the black market in his place. She's actually a bit supernatural herself. She can alter her biology, and so she's like obviously needs to escape, but it's a lot of like, it's surprisingly dark for a YA book. I think there's a lot of discussions about morality, and it makes you think. Like our main character, I think, is kind of an anti-hero, I would say. But this is really good. I have the second book in my TBR pile that I really need to get to because I definitely enjoyed this one. The fourth question is 366 days in the year, looking at your third shelf, name the sixth book on the shelf and name the sixth book after that. So we'll just use this shelf behind me and let's count from the bottom, I guess. So 1, 2, 3. This is our third shelf, and count from the bottom up, I guess. I don't know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The first book, I guess, of this shelf and then book set is The Leicht by Chloe Neill. I actually recently read this. This is an urban fantasy set in New Orleans. We had this like paranormal war that happened 7 years ago, and then all of these paranormal creatures are kind of exiled into this like Devil's Isle area in New Orleans. And what's interesting here is like our humans can be sensitives, but they kind of have to balance between using their magic too much or not enough, because they can basically become these wraiths, which are kind of, I don't know, I feel like they're kind of zombie-like creatures, and they just like are solely focused on obtaining magic and like consuming it. And then we've got a bounty hunter and who works with our main character, and this particular book deals with like a cult that is trying to destroy the like magical creatures essentially. So, you know, I did enjoy this. I talked about this fairly recently. I think I rated it 3 out of 5 stars. I don't think it's good as the Chicago and Vampire series, but it is really interesting, and there's something about it, like sometimes there's like slow pacing, but ultimately at the end of the book, and this has happened with all the books so far that I've read, there's something like at the end of the book where I'm like, oh, I need to keep reading and figure out what happens next. So anyway, so that was that one. And then the 6th book after that one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. So this is like this is the first book in the Wayfarers series, and it's like such a nice slice of life sci-fi series. It's just like so uplifting, I think. We follow Rosemary, who joins the crew of the Wayfarer. Basically, we've got like this kind of diverse crew on this ship, and they're offered the job of a lifetime to tunnel wormholes through space to a distant planet. And it's like, you know, sure, they'll earn enough money to live comfortably for years, but risking her life wasn't part of the job description. So the series is a lot about like found families, I think. But it was just like such a delight to read. I like love this series and Becky Chambers' writing in general, so it's something I would definitely recommend. The next question is question 5, leaping ahead, name 4 books that you want to read by the next leap year. So I figured I would talk about some upcoming books this year that I'm like super excited about. Obviously the first of these books that I'm going to talk about is Peace Talks by Jim Butcher. So this is, I think, the 16th book in the Dresden Files series. I'm ridiculously excited for that, and kind of, I guess, as a follow-up, Battleground, which was recently announced, and it's just like super exciting. You know, we're getting 2 Dresden Files books this year after not getting any for a while because of, you know, his personal circumstances. I just like absolutely cannot wait. So, you know, obviously since this is book 16, I don't really want to talk about too much of the plot here, but basically we have supernatural nations of the world meeting up to negotiate an end to ongoing hostilities. Naturally, it's peace talks. However, considering that the next book is Battleground, I don't think these peace talks are going to go well. So we've got some like political manipulations and things going on. But, you know, I think we all are aware at this point of how much I love the Dresden Files, and I just like absolutely cannot wait. Another book that I'll talk about is Light of the Jedi, which is, I think, the start to this new High Republic series of Star Wars that they're starting to do. So it's like 200 years before the events of the Phantom Menace. It's, you know, obviously the High Republic, so we've got all these Jedi Knights who are noble and wise, and they must face a frightening threat to themselves, the galaxy, and the Force itself, it says. So this first one, I think, is by Charles Soule, and then I seem to remember, there's like several other books coming out. So I think this is adult, and then there's like some YA and middle grade ones. I think Claudia Gray may be writing one. I could be mistaken. But yeah, it's something I definitely want to check out. I really like the Jedi in general, so I want to know more about, you know, their heyday, I guess. The next one that I'll talk about is The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher, and now I recently read The Twisted Ones by her and loved it, so I'm super excited for this. It comes out in October, so I feel like that's going to be like perfect for Halloween, you know, a spooky read. We've got a young woman discovering a strange portal in her uncle's house that leads to madness and terror. Ooh. It's like pray they're hungry. Our main character finds these words in the mysterious bunker that she's discovered behind a hole in the wall of her uncle's house. So she becomes obsessed with these words and starts exploring this area, but there's obviously like these portals, and they're haunted by creatures that seem to hear thoughts, and the more one fears them, the stronger they become. So that sounds great. I mean, I'm just so invested. Like, The Twisted Ones was just such a great blend of horror and humor, and I thought the main character was just so relatable and highly amusing. So I definitely want to see what else T. Kingfisher has for us. Then finally, the last one I'll mention here is Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. So I don't talk about, the Stormlight Archive all that much on my channel, I guess, which is kind of surprising because it's one of my favorite series. So I don't know why I haven't mentioned that, but yeah, I'm very excited to see what Rhythm of War has in store for us. It's just such an epic high fantasy, and I love it. We'll try to keep this super vague. So we've got resistance against an enemy invasion, and there's some sort of new technological discoveries that are beginning to change the face of war. So yeah, we'll leave it at that. If you haven't read The Way of Kings or the Stormlight Archive, I definitely suggest reading it. They're fantastic. I mean, I totally understand that they're intimidating, they're like large chunky books, but I will say, like, I never felt bored or felt like they were slow at all to read, so definitely recommend it if you're in the mood for like an epic high fantasy. The next question is Leapfrog. Name a book on your TBR that has green on it. So for this, I'm going with Veiled by Benedict Jacka. So obviously this cover is mostly green. But I think this is the 6th book in the Alex Ferris series, which I've talked about before on my channel. It's a fabulous urban fantasy series, and I think if you like the Dresden Files, you will also like this. But Alex is a diviner, so he basically sees probabilities of events happening, so he can kind of predict the future that way. So this particular one, Alex is trying to get allies, I think, in this particular one, even if it means accepting a job that enforces magical law. So he's got an uneasy alliance, and then I think his mission puts him into possession of an item that a lot of people are killing to get. So basically he's stuck in the middle of a deadly conflict and needs to be able to figure out who his friends are and who his enemies are. Yeah, so it's a really great series. I had recently picked up the other Alex Ferris books that I hadn't already owned, so I feel like a good binge of these books is in my future. The next question is Bad Luck. What bookish things do you steer clear from? So I've talked about this, I think, before on my channel. I really don't like second person tense. It's just something that really bothers me for, I don't really know why. It's just not something I choose to seek out. Strangely enough, the Gutter Prayer started off with the prologue and epilogue are in second person, but so I was like, oh no, when I first started the book, I was a little worried, but then, it goes into just normal third person, I think. So thankfully that was not bad, but that was something that came up with the 5th season, and I feel like, I don't know, I was talking to Angela from Literature Science Alliance about it, and, she was like, oh, well, this is why I think, because, I didn't really fully remember that book very well, but she was kind of explaining why she thought it was such a cool tool, I guess, in the books, and that certainly made things really interesting. I don't know if N.K. Jemison's books are necessarily for me, but that's neither here nor there. Another thing that I generally try to steer clear from is if, the book is shelved as some sort of religious thing. I'm not particularly religious myself, and I have no problem with other people being religious, that's totally fine, but it's just when that's the main theme of the book, I don't necessarily seek it out. I've obviously read books that deal with some sort of religion one way or another, and that's usually fine. I think it's mostly when it revolves around romance, Christian romance or something like that. That's not a genre that I necessarily want to seek out. That's a personal preference. I'm not super religious and wouldn't necessarily connect with the characters on that level. I don't tend to read a lot of literary fiction, and that's just because I feel like the writing style is really dense, and it's just not something I really enjoy reading. Classics, I don't tend to read a whole bunch of. Some of them are really good, but as a whole, I feel like I just don't connect with those stories as much. And also, something I was talking with Angela about was just stream of consciousness writing. I do not like that at all. So there you go. There's a handful of bookish no-nos from me. And then the 8th question or whatever prompt is to tag 4 people. But I think since I'm doing this past Leap Day, and I don't know who's already done this, I will just refrain from specifically tagging anybody, but, if you're interested in doing this, consider yourself tagged. It's certainly a fun tag, I think. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books, if you think you might pick them up, or just generally have thoughts on anything I said today. For your question of the day, let's go actually with your bookish no-nos. What are things that you tend to steer clear of? I think that would be really interesting to know. I hope you're having an excellent day and are reading something awesome. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, as that would certainly help me out. But with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up here and see you in the next one.